Did you know the police can't just search your home or your car without a reason? The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution is your shield against unreasonable searches. Learn how to use it. In this video, we're breaking down everything you need to know about warrants and searches. The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution protects against unreasonable search and seizures. It guarantees security in people of their persons, their papers, their homes, and their effects. What does that mean? Your purse, your wallet, your cell phone, your car, all of those things are covered by the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. And just because the Fourth Amendment is a federal document, it's applicable to the states, to the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. So this applies to the states as well. There's a few terms we want to just cover before we jump into the video. Reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion is when an officer needs to stop a person. Reasonable suspicion is not a lot. To arrest someone, police need probable cause. If you think of a human being as a measuring stick, beyond a reasonable doubt is their forehead. Preponderance of the evidence, the civil standard to take money out of someone's pocket is about halfway. It's actually 1% greater than half, 51%. And then to arrest somebody, well, it's probable cause. It's a kneecap, not a lot. Reasonable suspicion is less than the kneecap on the human body scale of measuring. It's not a lot, but it's more than a hunch. There has to be articulable reason why an officer stopped the person. That is required, but it's not a lot. And even though it's not a lot, officers still mess that up. Keep that in mind. The next thing we want to talk about is consensual encounters. An officer is allowed just to walk up to somebody and talk to them. Hey, how you doing? Anything I need to know? You have anything illegal going on? People fall for that. Just because an officer questions you does not mean that you're being arrested or detained or anything like that. Consensual encounters with law enforcement are allowed, just as when someone's questioned by a law enforcement officer, simply saying, "Am I free to leave?" is the only response. That way you cover yourself, whether you're being detained, arrested, anything like that, or this random consensual encounter. But consensual encounters are allowed in the United States. We've already talked about probable cause. Probable cause is the information required by police to arrest somebody, put them in handcuffs, put them in a cage, make them pay money if possible to get out of that cage, and put them on trial for a crime. It's not a lot of evidence. Probable cause, a lot of people think, oh, I need a lot more than just a kneecap for the human body scale, but it's not a lot of evidence. And search warrants. Search warrant in the United States is a prerequisite to a reasonable search. That's just the standard. And if there's not a search warrant, it's the state's burden to show why the search was still good. It puts the ball back in their court to show them, hey, we didn't need a warrant because whatever they're going to say. So those are some just key words we're going to want to know about and understand going forward with this video. The Fourth Amendment, what it protects. Fourth Amendment, again, protects against unreasonable search and seizure by government actors. A government actor can be the police, it can be the IRS, it could be anything. It's a government actor. People get confused all the time. Well, it wasn't the police, it was the IRS. Marc, it wasn't the police, it was the Department of Natural Resources. It's the police. Detective is a police, it's all the police. And so let's break this down a little bit further. What's a search? A search is looking for something that's not openly visible. So if it's not in plain sight and they're trying to look for it, that's a search. Now, a seizure is when an officer restricts the movement or freedom of another person. And it doesn't have to be physically. It can simply be, hey, show of force. There's 5 officers here. It could be a command from the officer. Stop. If somebody says, am I free to leave? No, you're not. Okay, they're not free to leave. That's a seizure. So seizure is not always easy to see, but it's kind of one of those things. You know it when you see it. If 6 officers have their hands on their sidearm and they're coming towards you, well, you may not feel free to leave because of the show of force. So keep that in mind. Seizure is not always what we think of as an arrest or an officer stopping you. It could be lots of different things, and there's nuances on what a seizure can be. And these protections against unreasonable search and seizures extend to homes, cars, cell phones, purses, backpacks. All these things have become part and parcel with normal society, and it grows. Cell phone wasn't envisioned by the founding fathers, but the Constitution was designed to encompass things that could come into existence, such as a cell phone, backpack, purse, anything that we might have an expectation of privacy. Looking at unreasonable search and seizure, the key is to understand the word reasonableness. Keep that in mind. The warrant requirement. Generally, a search needs to have a warrant. And a warrant needs to explain what the officers our government is looking for, and it needs to explain it in pretty good detail so there's not just a general search of someone's everything. Hey, I want to search your entire house to see if you have money or safe or drugs or anything like that. A proper search warrant requires probable cause. Probable cause, again, it's more than reasonable suspicion, but it's less than more likely than not. We think based on X, Y, and Z, there's criminal activity afoot and we're applying for the search warrant. There needs to be enough evidence for probable cause, but it's not a lot. Again, it's a human kneecap of measurements, not a lot of evidence, but it still needs to be there. And even though it's not a lot required, officers still mess this up when applying for search warrants. A warrant is going to be invalid if it gives the officer too much discretion in what's to be seized. And evidence seized outside of a warrant, well, it's generally going to be excluded. Now, there are all sorts of exceptions to the warrant requirement. Now, remember, a search requires a warrant unless there's a really good reason, and there are some exceptions. The first giant exception is the search incident to arrest. If somebody's in their vehicle and they're being arrested, basically anywhere where they could touch or in control of is going to get searched. That probably doesn't include the trunk, unless the person's by there talking about climbing to the trunk, to include their immediate area. So the general area around a person being arrested is going to be searched. It's lawful to search that. It can get kind of complicated because an officer has to have probable cause for the arrest before the search occurs. But if during the search they find illegal things, that's going to be okay and they can charge additional charges. But there had to have been a reason for the officer to search that car, and there has to have been a probable cause, and that reason has to have existed before the officer searched that car for a search incident to arrest to be lawful. It can get kind of nuanced, but it's something that we see all the time. Just be careful what's in your car. Be careful what you allow people to bring into your car, especially if you don't know them or don't know them very well. Why are you bringing 3 backpacks? It can get you in trouble. It looks bad. There's also an inventory search. If someone's getting their car impounded, so they get caught driving without insurance, they get caught driving suspended license, the officer impounds that vehicle. There's not necessarily an exception, but it's something called an inventory search. They're allowed to inventory that vehicle, and they do it under the guise of protecting the property owner to make sure there's an accounting so that, well, you don't want to say the police officer stole anything or the impound lot, but it's basically a free-for-all search. And they can get to go through a lot more than a search incident to arrest. And anything they find, unfortunately, it can be charged against you. Now it's going to have to prove that it was yours, prove that you had your control over it, but the search incident to arrest is just painful. And another reason why you don't want to have things in your car that you don't know about. You don't want people to bring things into your car that you don't know about. A search incident to arrest is supposed to be pursuant to a written out policy. It's an administrative search. Believe me, the administrative search, they'll still use anything they find against you. But they have to follow certain rules. Generally better to be done at the impound lot than the side of the road, but the side of the road's okay if the inventory search protocol allows for that. Whenever there's a search, we always try to attack the search, and for a vehicle, one of the best ways to do that is to show that it was not an inventory search. It was some sort of discretionary search, which was outside the bounds of the law. So that's the second exception to the warrant requirement. Another exception is this exigent circumstances. If there's screaming inside of the house, an officer walks by and he hears a scream, guess what? They get to break that door down and come figure out what's going on. If there is the smell of marijuana coming outside the house, an officer knocks on the door and he can hear people inside, but they're not coming to the door, well, guess what? He's probably going to be able to break down that door and make sure that the evidence isn't being destroyed. Just understand that there are exigent circumstances to occur. But when there is an exigent circumstance, it's going to be the burden on the state to show, hey, there was a search warrant, but we had to search because, and it gives them more room to explain why. And when the state's explaining, usually gives them more room for you to try to turn those words against them. There's also the plain view doctrine. If the officer knocks on your door, hey, we just want to chat with you. We heard some things going around the area, but they can see drugs on your coffee table. Well, guess what? That's plain view. They don't need a warrant for that. They can see contraband. That's going to be problematic. The same thing if you're out and about and you're smoking weed or you're doing illegal activity. If they see things, well, guess what? That's going to be problematic. That goes for the home and for the house. People, nowadays with the automatic license plate readers, they can literally figure out if the owner of a vehicle has a suspended license. They can figure out the person is supposed to have a firearm because they can look at the criminal history. And if they pull somebody over and they know that you have a felony conviction, but they can see the butt of a firearm right next to you, guess what? That's plain view. That's going to give them more reason to stop, search you, try to figure out, because you're not supposed to have a handgun. So don't keep things in plain view. Don't commit crime, but don't have things in plain view that make an officer think, well, I need to search this one. I got to figure out what's going on here. I want to investigate further. Keep things out of plain view. One of the biggest ones we see, and so giving you all this information, try to avoid unnecessary law enforcement contact, but the first thing officer is going to do is simply say, hey, can I search your car? Hey, can I search your vehicle? And then they're going to try to do a Jedi trick on you. But listen, man, if you tell me I can search, then I kind of know that nothing's illegal in here, right? Hey, if you're innocent, then you don't really care if I search your car, right? Hey, if you got nothing to hide, well, then let me search the house. And sometimes people start overthinking it. Well, if I tell him he can search, he's probably not going to search because he told me if I agree to it, I'm innocent. And if he thinks I'm innocent, no, it's a trick. It's all Jedi mind trick. Don't fall for it. Can I search your car? If you're innocent, you let me search my car. No, I want a lawyer. Can I search your home? If you got nothing to hide, I can search your home. I plead the fifth. I want a lawyer. I do not consent. I do not consent. That's it. I do not consent. I want a lawyer. That's it. Don't consent. Don't give in. Do you mind if I pat you down for my safety? I don't consent. Am I free to leave? Am I free to leave? I do not consent. I want a lawyer. You really can't go wrong saying those three things all at the same time. You cover all your bases, right? It's pretty amazing. Don't consent. That's the easiest way for officers to search you. And people all the time call us law firm. Hey, Mark, I got searched. I didn't do anything wrong. The officer intimidated me. He got me a consent. There are ways to attack consent through searches. I didn't really give consent, show of force. I had 6 officers all with their hands on their firearms asking me questions. There are ways to try to do that, but it's so hard. It's so incredibly hard. I don't mind hard work. I don't, but I don't mind that things aren't always an uphill battle. So don't consent to searches of your person, your property, anything like that. There's another exception too. If you're driving a car and you get pulled over for a traffic infraction, well, they've seized you, but there's not a warrant requirement. But the police are allowed under the United States Constitution and Indiana's Constitution to stop a vehicle if they see a traffic infraction. There's some other minor exceptions. Generally, you have to see a traffic infraction. That's a seizure, but you're not really under arrest, but you can't leave. So it's a detention of some sort. And then during a traffic infraction, officers can't prolong a traffic stop unnecessarily because then it becomes a detention/arrest. They are allowed to check for insurance, check for driver's license, check for warrants, ask just some identifying questions. Be careful when you're talking with an officer at the side of the road. Where are you coming from? I plead the fifth. Am I free to leave? Just, that's it. Be careful answering. Can I search the car? Don't consent to a search. Don't be shy about that. Now, in Indiana, if the officer stops you for a traffic violation and they don't have to tell you why they stopped you, it's kind of confusing, you do have to provide your driver's license or your identifying information. Verbally say your name, date of birth, your address. If you don't do that, that's another crime called refusal to identify. It's a C misdemeanor. It's a crime that you can get arrested for. So I do encourage when people are stopped while in their car, driving their car, not necessarily the passenger, but driving their car, be polite, provide your driver's license or your name, address, date of birth, verbally, but don't be telling the officer your life story. Where are you coming from? I'm coming from a bar. How many drinks did you have? Only had one. You're setting yourself up for failure. I plead the fifth. That's it. I plead the fifth. Don't say anything else. It's so easy to not incriminate yourself by simply being consistent and letting the officer know you're exercising your rights that are guaranteed to you. You have these rights. Don't just throw them away willy-nilly. These are your rights. There's a reason we have these. So how does one politely tell an officer I don't consent to a search? Well, it's pretty easy. Whenever an officer talks to you, since there's no real easy way to tell if you're being arrested, if you're being investigated for a crime, or if it's a consensual search, the best thing to do if an officer is talking to you, simply state, am I free to leave? That puts the ball in the officer's court. And he can do a few things. Yeah, you are. And if he says that, leave. Leave. Walk away politely. If he says, no, you're not, then you should know that you are being detained for either an arrest, a reasonable suspicion, or some sort of carry stop, but you're not free to leave. You're under investigation. That should click in you. I want a lawyer. I plead the fifth. I do not consent to a search. Those 3 things. It's magical. If people exercise those rights like that, I probably have to find a new job because that would solve so many people's problems. Officers are likely going to get irritated with you because so many people are sheep and they agree to whatever the officers ask. Officer might get mad. I can't believe you're making me do this. You must have something to hide if you're making me do all this extra work. I can't believe you would do this. I want to get home too today. I'm going to make sure they throw the book at you. I plead the fifth. I want a lawyer. I do not consent to a search. Be nice and calm. Let his body cam get all of that irritation. Let his body cam get all of that. He's probably going to lose it by the time it's time to give it to the prosecutor. But hopefully you have your own phone and you've turned on the recording app, put it in your pocket, and you're allowed to do that. Now, you may not be allowed to video camera like that, but putting your phone in your pocket and recording it, Facebook Living it, hey, you know what? Problem solved. They can't lose that. I encourage everyone to record their encounters with police officers. I include, if you have an Apple phone, hey Siri, record the encounter. Done. He may not even know it. The phone may be in your car, maybe in your pocket. Hey Siri, record the encounter. Hey Siri, end recording. Upload. Hey Siri, upload. You start saying stuff like that, officers are going to get freaked out because they're not prepared for that type of savvy person they're investigating. And it keeps them honest. I love technology because while I do believe 99% of officers are honest and hardworking, that 1% spoils the bunch. And you having the ability to record conversation, record your interaction with police, helps keep that 1% honest. Now, if your rights are being violated, please do not forcibly resist. I plead the fifth. I want an attorney. I do not consent to a search. Can't go wrong with that. But if you start resisting, start pulling away, start getting loud, disorderly conduct, be a misdemeanor, every right to arrest you. If you start pushing and pulling your arms away, falling, resisting law enforcement, a misdemeanor. If the officer says, ouch, he pulled away and it hurt me, it's a felony. Do not forcibly resist. Hire the best attorney you can to fight for your rights. That's going to be the best thing if your rights are being violated. At the end of the day, the rights guaranteed under the Fourth Amendment are only as good as the application of the people to them. And I don't condone criminal activity. I don't want anyone to commit crime, but I also do not want officers searching people willy-nilly and exercising an abuse of authority against the people. The people need to stand up for their rights, which are guaranteed to them, the United States Constitution, as applicable to the states under the 14th Amendment. In my heart of hearts, I truly believe if everyone asserts their rights, we are all better off. If you have any questions about search and seizure, give me a call, 317-632-3642. I will talk about this stuff all day. Most importantly, remember to always plead the fifth.